Hello friends and fellow gamers, it's MKxJUMP here, and Adam and I have decided to start a new series where we discuss subclasses in Dungeons & Dragons. So we're going to be breaking these down for you, discussing our build ideas, what we think the strengths and weaknesses are, and how we'd roleplay them at the table. We're going to start this off with the College of Lawbard in today's video, but before we get into the video, I'd like to explain how we're doing this and how you can also be a part of it. Join us at twitch.tv/MKxJUMP every Tuesday at 8 PM. The link for that is down below in the description. I'll be doing these live with Adam, and then eventually we'll archive them on YouTube as the week after progresses. So if you can't catch them on Twitch, that's cool, but you can join us for a question and answer after we do each class if you want to get involved in that. However, you can just wait for the YouTube options by clicking subscribe now to catch our subclass breakdowns in the future. We'll be doing a mix of things from the Player's Handbook, from Xanathar's Guide, and of course from Tasha's Cauldron, and we will focus on a lot of the subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron because they're new, and that's probably the kind of things you guys are hoping to play at your tables. But of course, we're starting with the College of Lawbard because we thought we'd start somewhere safe at home with the Player's Handbook. So guys, let's go check out today's video. We're going to be kicking off our subclass breakdown with the Lawbard. The reason we chose to do the College of Lawbard first is because not only is it one of the, or actually the most popular Bard subclass in the game, which is mainly because it's available in the Player's Handbook and Basic Rules, it is also available to pretty much any player wanting to start D&D for literally those two reasons. It's in the Player's Handbook and the Basic Rules. So it's very popular, a lot of people enjoy it, and we thought we'd give you our take on it. So let's take a look at the Lawbard. Bards of the College of Law know something about most things, collecting bits of knowledge from sources as diverse as scholarly tomes and peasant tales. Whether singing folk ballads in taverns or elaborate compositions in royal courts, these bards use their gifts to hold audiences spellbound. When the applause dies down, the audience members might find themselves questioning everything they held to be true, from their faith in the priesthood of the local temple to their loyalty to the king. So, these are basically scholars and history tellers that tell great tales, sometimes not necessarily true, and are the classic bard that inspires and excites those around them. These bards gain all the features of the base bard class, which you can go check out, either in the Player's Handbook or on D&D Beyond, whichever your preferred toolset is. But they also get at third level proficiencies in 3 skills of your choice. They gain the ability Cutting Words, which means you learn how to use your wit to distract, confuse, and otherwise sap the confidence and competence of others. How this works mechanically is a creature that you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, an ability check, or damage roll. You can use your reaction to expend one of your bardic inspiration die and subtract the number you roll from the creature's roll. So basically, it debuffs the opponent's abilities, attack rolls, or damage rolls. Very nice. At level 6, you get additional magical secrets, which mean you can learn 2 spells of your choice from any class in the game. A spell you choose must be of a level you can cast, however. So because this is achieved at 6th level, the spells available are 3rd, 2nd, and 1st level spells, also cantrips as well. And finally, at 14th level, you get the feature Peerless Skill. When you make an ability check, you can expand one of your bardic inspiration, roll a bardic inspiration die, add the number to your ability check, and you can choose to do this after you roll the die for the ability check, but before the DM tells you whether you succeed or fail. So, Adam, my host here, or co-host should I say, we're going to be discussing why we think this is good or bad, the strengths, the weaknesses, and how we would personally play this if we were to play a Lawbard at the table. So, Adam, let's begin with what you think are the strengths of this class. What do you think this brings to the table that other bards don't? Or how it uses the things in the base bard that you can complement the abilities of this subclass?
So I think the key feature here is the additional magical secrets you get at level 6. So bards get this ability anyway at levels, I'm going to say, is it 9 or 10, then 14 and 18th level. But having it at 6th level means you get more spells than other bards, and you get these spells earlier. And being able to choose spells from any spell list is an exceptionally powerful and creative ability, and it's very, very versatile. Also, the cutting words feature as a use for your bardic inspiration is a pretty decent defensive buff, not only for you but for the rest of the party. It can defend from some key attacks, and as a reaction, it doesn't interfere with bonus actions, which bards have a lot of uses for, and other classes have a lot of uses for if they're needing to use their bonus action and stuff.
Yeah, so to basically unpack what Adam was saying there, is the bardic inspiration, the way it normally works in the base class, is something that you can give as a bonus action to an ally. But because of how the cutting words feature works, you can use it as a reaction instead, which means on your turn it's going to open up your bonus action to do additional things. Now, this could be seen as a pro or a con, because some people might want to use their reactions for things such as the shield spell, which is a spell you can take with additional magical secrets, or perhaps, in a more niche case, absorb elements, or even counterspell, if that's something you wanted to go for. However, in other cases, there are spells that you can take that use your bonus actions. There are some great options, in fact, that use your bonus actions, and freeing up that bonus action is definitely something cutting words allows you to do. As well, one thing I don't think you mentioned about cutting words, which I'd like to mention, is I believe it can reduce damage rolls, and that's fantastic. The way concentration works in this game is if you get hit by an attack which causes damage to you, you then have to roll a Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on that spell. The DC for that is 10 or the damage you take, whichever is higher. So if you can reduce the amount of damage someone is taking, you then increase the chance that that's going to be below 10. So if your friend, the wizard, just got hit by an attack, and it's like, ah, crap, how do I help him out? Actually using one of your bardic inspiration die to soften the blow so that they can maintain concentration on that critical spell, whether it's haste on the fighter, whether it's hypnotic pattern, which is keeping half of the enemies out of bay, or even if it's just a Bigsby's hand that's going around and slapping all the enemies silly, you might want to help people out. It also works for you as well, because as a bard, you are a spellcaster, and concentrating on spells is very important.
And you have a lot of concentration spells.
Yes, absolutely you do.
I will say on that point, the cutting out the attack roll is potentially a more dramatic, because you can just stop an attack altogether rather than reducing the damage.
Yes.
But there are cases where your cutting words will do nothing to the attack. So in that case, it might be worth reducing the damage.
Yeah, it really depends, because, for example, let's say the opponent rolls really high and you know the wizard's AC is dreadful, or even your AC is dreadful, and that's something we will be talking about in a second. Sometimes you are left with no choice but to reduce the damage, because there is no number you could roll within reasonable probability that you could stop the attack. And there's nothing worse than rolling your bardic inspiration die and it not stopping the attack, and you still suffering all the damage you would have taken anyway, but you lose the bardic inspiration die. Although, for me, that's a little bit of fun, actually. Taking the gamble. If you enjoy the thrill of rolling dice, bardic inspiration is definitely something for you, and this feat even more so. Cutting words is just so fun for that reason, I think, as well. Because if, like, you know, let's say you're 3 points off, you're like, please don't roll a 1 or a 2. Please don't roll a 1 or a 2. And you debuff them by, like, you say you roll 3, and you're like, oh, thank goodness that's 1 below my AC. That's quite an epic moment for the party, and everyone can cheer, and everyone gets happy. And it's always good fun. However, as we said, this class is not perfect, and I think the biggest weakness of the Bard, and the Lore Bard in particular, is their AC. So, basically, as a Bard, the only proficiency you gain that gives you armor is light armor. And as a spellcaster, you're probably going to want to boost charisma as opposed to dexterity, so your AC is going to naturally be lower than other people's. To an extent, cutting words is good because it can decrease the enemy's effective attack ability, which increases your effective AC. But once you're out of bardic inspiration die, that's kind of gone. And that's pretty sad. So, Adam, what do you think about this loss of AC that hits bards pretty early on? It's right off the bat. You only get light armor.
I think it's one of the most drastic disadvantages bards have. And it's something you need to be aware of when you're playing a bard, because it's not obviously apparent when you look at a bard compared to a wizard, because like everyone would look at a wizard and say, well, they get no armor, at least bards get some armor. But the difference is wizards get a bunch of defensive spells, such as the shield spell and the mage armor spell, and
Yep.
they can boost their armor up much more dramatically than bards can. Bards get none of these spells that help their defenses, so you're just stuck there with an armor class that could be as low as 13, 14, and that's not going to save you in most cases at level 1.
Mm-hmm. Now, some people have argued that, oh, well, then you should just hide behind things, or you should try and break line of sight with your opponents. And, okay, sure, I'd say about 50% of the time, that works. If you have a guy who's playing as a barbarian or a fighter with a shield that knows exactly what they're doing, and they're running in and they're soaking up all the hits and distracting the opponents, that's great. But as soon as the party gets flanked or that fighter goes down, you are basically a free target because your AC is so shockingly low. And that is, as we have acknowledged, one of the biggest weaknesses that the Bard holds. So the only way to really overcome this, I think, is in 2 key ways. The first is don't play as a Lore Bard, go as College of Valor, but we're talking about the Lore Bard today, so that's not an option, and that will get you medium armor and shields. The other option is to take the moderately armored feat, which also gets you medium armor and shields. But if medium armor and shields isn't for you, I mean, yes, there's multi-classing options as well, but we are talking about this subclass, so that's our main focus. There is additional magical secrets. So the spells that really jump out for people who get to level 6, and it's like, what spells should I choose? A lot of the time, it's things that make up for this major weakness. Whether you take mage armor, whether it's shield, or even spells that just protect the whole party from damage in general, such as Counterspell. These are all some pretty good options to take. They're not compulsory, but it definitely is difficult to pick something different when you have that choice. Because having such a low AC, no matter how hard you're concentrating on a spell, if you get hit and you break that concentration, it's game over.
And as you get into higher levels of play, casters in your party, their concentration spells are going to be so powerful that a lot of the combat will revolve around who can break whose concentration.
Yeah.
As a caster, your job is often to cast a very powerful spell that requires concentration, a hypnotic pattern or a wall of force or an animate object. And then your job from there is just to make sure whatever you can do, you're keeping concentration on that spell. Meanwhile, especially if your DM has intelligent enemies, they're going to know that's happening and they're going to target you. So it's all very well saying when you can hide and then you have the tank, but remember the other side is played by a person, and that person can decide whether the enemy is dumb and is going to attack the person that your party has designed them to attack, or whether that person is clever and knows what is going on and is going to attack you because you are the biggest threat.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, you are the biggest threat because the guy running around with a whole swarm of animated objects flying around him is a little more terrifying than a big silly half-orc with a great axe. A lot of the time, at lower levels, the half-orc with the great axe is scary, but as soon as the spellcaster gets access to some of those crazy spells... I mean, I as an individual on the battlefield would be far more scared of a wizard than I would be of a fighter. Maybe that's just personal preference, maybe that's as a DM, but there's definitely a lot of times I'm like, that wizard's the problem, or that bard's the problem. I want to take them down first.
Well, when the evil wizard's pet dragon gets locked in the wall of force, they're going to be targeting the person that is locking their pet dragon in the wall of force.
Yes. Yeah. I can only think of how frustrating that would be, balancing a beautiful encounter and then you taking a CR 5 or higher enemy straight out of it with a wall of force. Beautiful. Anyway, the bard. So, what do you think the bard should be doing as a party role in the game? So if you don't know, there are roles that different subclasses or classes should probably lean to playing towards. A party that is well made will have lots of people fulfilling a lot of these roles, and having a holistic party that can do all of these things. So for example, there's a striker who wants to deal damage, a face who wants to do all the talking, a tank who wants to be the guy that people are scared of and decide to poke things at but then fail miserably, the healer, the one who keeps everyone alive if they go down, the controller, the one that basically stops opponents by wall of forcing their favourite dragons, for example. And then there's other things such as someone who can offer intelligence or knowledge for the party, the scout who goes ahead, the utility caster who can basically provide interesting spells to make the DM's complicated problems far less complicated. And then, of course, blasters for big booms, summoners to summon big scary things, and buffers and debuffers to make everyone better or the enemies worse. So what do you think the Bard is when you bring them to the table?
So a Bard, again, is quite versatile. They are mainly, in my opinion, more geared towards support, buffing, debuffing, and then skill-based stuff, especially face skills, because they are charisma-based casters, so their main stat is their charisma. But they can also turn their hands to be knowledge. They're a little bit good at any skill because of they have this thing where they're sort of good at everything. So they're very versatile. They have some healing options. They have a lot of buffing, debuffing options, and they have some utility casting options as well.
I personally believe that choosing a role to really focus on, especially in combat, is probably where you're going to shine when getting your Lore Bard. If you haven't already figured out, the great thing about the Lore Bard is versatility. Additional magical secrets let you pick spells from other areas. You get additional spells that you can choose from anywhere as the Bard levels up, as given to you by the base class. You gain plenty of proficiencies and skills, and only focusing on charisma really basically means you're kind of free to lean into particular skills that are going to help the party. Let's say the party doesn't have anyone who's really good at perception. You might want to go with some stuff in wisdom and take perception. Maybe they don't really have a good scout. Why don't you go and get expertise in stealth and be the new party's rogue, let's say. There's a lot of good things you can do that fill in the gaps of the party. So a lot of things I notice at D&D tables especially is if a party doesn't have a session 0, a lot of people show up with a mismatch of characters and they don't really feel very gelled together. And such parties are probably more likely to find themselves in a situation where a TPK could happen. If, however, you get talking with each other before you design your characters and go, well, you're playing this, and I'm thinking of playing this, well, what if I did this? And suddenly you start thinking, well, if you're taking that skill, I'll take this skill. Maybe it's a bit min-maxy for your liking, but you can often find role-playing decisions to do this, which we'll talk about later on. But finding the thing that your character does best, whether it's being the face, whether it's being the brains, that's something fun. However, in combat, really, I'd say that your main 2 roles are going to be buffing and debuffing your party, or the enemies, and controlling enemies with concentration spells, locking them down. You could be a blaster if you wanted to go take Fireball, but there are classes that do that better. And in some senses, I think later on, especially with the new Chasser spells, you could even be a summoner, which could make for a very interesting Bard build as well. So, with that said, how do you think the Bard could be effective in combat, Adam? What do you think are the things you should be focusing on, whether it's specific spells or abilities or options you should bring if you fight an enemy?
Well, the Lord Bard specifically, it all kind of depends on what spells you go for with your magical secrets, I think. Bards naturally have a lot of debuffing and sort of, it's hard to kind of blur the line between debuffing and controlling, because like Hypnotic Pattern, is it a debuff or is it a control spell? Up to you how you decide that. But they get Hypnotic Pattern. Generally, all bards get that. They get a lot of these sort of spells. Polymorph just can take things out of a fight, and also just buff your allies. They get a lot of spells that are specifically buffing and debuffing. They can't necessarily control the battlefield as well. I think you have extra things like that. They don't get your Sleet Storms, your Spike, Plant Growth, your Wall spells. So they're mainly more focused on debuffing, and then they have some solid healing options. They have obviously Healing Word, and then Mass Healing Word, I guess.
I mean, they even get Aid now.
Yeah, and they get Aid now.
Yeah.
But they don't, on the base spell list, they don't get any real blast spells. I guess they get Synaptic Static. But that's quite a way in. Before that, you're very limited. They don't get many single target damage spells, which is common across most spellcasters, but especially on the Bard. And they don't get any weapon buffing spells. You know, they don't get anything like Magic Weapon or Elemental Weapon or anything like that. So those are things that if you want in your build, you're going to have to like add in with magical secrets.
Yeah.
And also summoning as well is another thing you're going to have to add in. So naturally buff debuff, but because of this magical secrets, you can kind of do whatever your party needs. I think that's the thing. Is you want to, when you're playing a lore bard, you want to look at the party and think, well, what are they not doing? If there's a wizard, do I need to take fireball and counterspell? If he's going to take, if he or she, if they are going to take fireball and counterspell and all the wizardy stuff. If there's a druid who's taking conjure animals, do I need to go and get conjure animals with my magical secrets? Probably not. If there's a cleric, do I need to add in revivify if the cleric can do revivify? That's the question, I think, for the lore bard, is what is already covered and what can I cover?
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. And I think this is where the lore bard shines compared to other bards, is the additional magical secrets you get at 6th level gives you 2 extra spells. That means you can specialize even more. Rather than having to wait for ages and then kind of almost feeling like you're forced to take shield and counterspell, let's say, because you just need that protection. Because you can either go and take them really early on at 6th level, as you level up and get more magical secrets, you can then go and fill these gaps. You can then say, well, as Adam said, the party might not have a wizard, and you think, oh, well, I'm then going to take Wall of Force and Fireball. Or the party might not have a druid, and then you can go for conjure animals or some other form of mass control spell or summoning spell, which could be very exciting for your players with you. So the additional magical secrets almost opens doors to you that other bards don't have, because not only could you shore up your weaknesses, you can then also shore up the entire party's weaknesses by plugging holes that aren't already available, and I'm pretty sure the other players at the party would love you for that. One thing,
I think this is one thing that I've kind of struggled with lore bards, is that 6th level magical secrets is great, but it almost feels like what I'm doing with it is taking the essentials so I can get really cool higher level magical secrets, rather than having to take, like, most bards should probably at least consider counterspell. Like, counterspell is such a defining sort of spell that's not on your list that most bards should consider counterspell at their first option to get magical secrets.
Yeah.
So having that at 6th level means you don't have to take it later on, and you can take when you have access to higher level spells, because it's a 3rd level spell. Yeah. By the time most bards get their magical secrets, they are able to choose 4th and 5th level spells with them. So taking a 3rd level spell when you have options to 4th and 5th level kind of feels a bit bad, but taking it at 6th level, where that is the highest level you can take, feels a lot better, but it almost feels like a non-choice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, then again, I think if this just said additional magical secrets, you learn shield and counterspell at 6th level.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's tough for me because I feel the distinctive benefit at 9th level rather than 6th level.
Yes. I also would agree that it almost feels like it takes a little bit of your autonomy away. But then again, that's if you wear your little optimizer cap. Sometimes you could take your optimizer cap off and be like, you know what, fine, we'll just do without counterspell. And I'd even say that makes for some really fun combat. I mean, how many times has an epic spell about to be cast by a DM that's completely terrifying for the party? Let's say one of your allies is down and the big bad grabs that ally and goes to dimension door them away, and because they're unconscious they can't willfully resist the spell. That's terrifying. But then if the wizard goes counterspell or the bard goes counterspell, suddenly that dimension door moment is no longer as epic as it could have been, because the counterspell steals its glory. So on one hand, being forced to pick counterspell because you've got your little optimizer hat on is great and all, but it can often ruin moments for the table and party of entertainment. But sometimes parties don't like drama. Some people just want to play D&D.
Okay, but so now we've dissed it. Speaking of that little optimizer hat,
yeah.
If you wanted to build a lore bard to be as effective as it could be in combat, what choices would you at least consider?
Me, as for my additional magical secrets.
Just general choices for the lore bard, whether it's feats, whether it's spells.
Okay. Well, I think I've already Tactics. Okay, so I think one thing I would do is definitely stick back. One tactic is stay back and buddy up. Buddy up with another spellcaster, because things could get bad fast if you don't have a spellcasting buddy by your side. Because let's say you've used your reaction and you don't have counterspell. If they've got it for you, that's great. That's helpful. If there isn't another caster in the party, because maybe it's a smaller party, you still need to stay back. Let the other people go forwards. And just keep yourself in strategic positions. Use terrain to your advantage. Always try to keep the high ground. Always try and stay behind cover. Remember that you can break up your movement. You can move, cast a spell, move back again. That's actually one of the most annoying strategies that I've ever seen, especially in dungeons. You open the door, and then the tank goes in. Rah! And then the bard stays in the previous room, runs in, casts some spells, then runs out the room again and hides behind the door. And keeps doing that over and over again. Because it's a perfectly legitimate strategy. And that can increase your effective armor. If you want to be a bit more brave, there's such feats as Moderately Armored, which gives you medium armor shields, which I've already mentioned. If you feel like you want more spells, there are the new touched feats that have been given to Tasha's Cauldron, which, such as Fey Touched, that gives you Misty Step and an additional first level spell that is, I believe, Enchantment or Divination, which is very fun. That can be Hex, that can be Bless. There's some very fun spells. And Misty Step lets you teleport out of there, which is also fantastic. And you could also take Shadow Touched, which gives you invisibility and a necromancy spell at first level, or a illusion spell at first level. Yes, so there's a lot of fun there. I think generally what you want to do is often spend your actions, first off, casting big epic concentration spell. And then the rest of your actions, little spells that either hurt your opponent or improve the chance that you're going to maintain concentration. Big standouts are Mirror Image, fantastic defense spell. And then for little spotty things you can throw out, you've got Blindness, Deafness. You've got Grease, I think. Can you take that from additional magical secrets, or is that now available from Tasha's Cauldron?
I think no. It was on the Sorcerer Tasha's Cauldron. I don't think it's on the Bard.
Okay, but either way, that's still a funny spell. If you want a fun spell, additional magical secrets, it's not amazing, but it's still fun. But you can take some spells that don't require concentration that you can just blast out. So that's also a lot of fun. But I think one thing we can do now to kind of really compress our ideas is talk about some build suggestions, like some very specific builds, not only for how we'd play them, but also how we'd role play them as well. So I think I'll give one of my suggestions first, is that I would think in a party where there isn't a wizard, I'd try and build my bard as if they were a wizard. I would take Shield, I'd take Counterspell, I'd probably even pick up Fireball. I might pick up fun things like Telekinesis or Animate Objects or things like that. Spells that traditionally the wizard would have that you can then just bring and almost feature as a charismatic wizard. You lean into your knowledge of things. You take a lot of intelligence-based spells. You bump up your intelligence maybe to 14 to have +2 intelligence and keep that charisma going up as well. And then take the additional proficiencies in things like history, in Arcana, and be the wizard of the party, because that can be an awful lot of fun. Maybe take the sage background to even lean into that even more, so that if you can't figure something out, your DM can at least tell you how you could possibly learn that information. And that's a really great thing to do, assuming you don't have a wizard. If you do have a wizard, that could then steal from the wizard's glory, which is actually one thing I want to really stress. If you're a lore bard, fill in the gaps. Do not do something someone else is already doing, because that can make them sad. Remember, you're having fun with people, and suddenly gaining an ability that makes someone else feel less important and makes their character feel not special can be something quite disappointing. What about you, Adam? Have you got a suggested build?
But it's the same build.
Okay. Well, let's go with another one then.
But no, I will mention some extra things on it. I will also, for the lore side of it, I like the idea of them being either a lore keeper or a scholar, or maybe even some sort of sleazy politician that's trying to use their magic to gain power and influence over other people. I will also mention, because this is very important with the wizard build, is your Jack of all trades ability applies to any ability check. that doesn't already include your proficiency bonus. This includes ability checks you make when casting spells. So if you do pick up counterspell, you technically are the best person to cast counterspell, because if you have to make an ability check, which it happens when you need to counterspell a spell of higher level than the spell you cast counterspell at, you get extra bonuses on that. This also applies to telekinesis and dispel magic. So if you want to be this sort of person that deals with that, that's the thing to consider on those specific spells. Any spell that requires an ability check, you have a bonus to.
Yes. That's very nice. That makes me like telekinesis even more. I find that a really fun spell. Underrated.
Yeah. So obviously with this spell, some choice spells would be taking Fireball to incorporate a little blasting. Wall of Force, we already spoke about telekinesis counterspell. Yeah, but there's tons of options on the Wizard spell list. Wizard spell list is one of the most fun and versatile spell lists in the game. I really like it. Preferred races for this, I mean, you can be any race, I'm going to just say that as well, but I felt like, for me, when looking at this, the things I had in my head were like humans, gnomes, maybe half-elves, dragonborns, and tieflings. I thought would fit this type of character. But
Yeah, I can see that.
Stay, anything works, but those are the ones that kind of stuck in my mind.
Yeah. I could even see a grizzled hobgoblin. That's this lawkeeper. But then again, you got to remember they have to sing. Maybe that's a fun thing. Maybe it's a hobgoblin that can't sing. Maybe that's his bardic expression is more poetic than musical. I don't know. That's the other thing. How do you express yourself as a musician? It doesn't just have to be through song and music. It could be through poetry or writing. Either way, as long as you've got a forceful personality, who cares? It's all about being charismatic and woohoo, because you're the bard. Another build I came up with is a Pseudo Rogue. So you'll notice a lot of my builds are always leaning into other classes and trying to fill that gap. So a big spell that jumped out to me for additional magical secrets here was Pass Without a Trace. That plus 10 to stealth rolls is silly, and just being able to pick that up can be a lot of fun, because you've got to think, you're only allowed 3rd, 2nd, or 1st level spells. What's a really good 2nd level spell? Pass Without a Trace. It's bonkersly strong. You can make some encounters just not happen. You could just wander through a forest with plus 10 stealth, and you could even have expertise in stealth as well, and you can roll those legendary 30 plus stealth rolls that make DMs cry, because nothing has a passive perception that good. You're just ungodly invisible. You've basically dipped into the ethereal plane for a moment. It's really good. I would even say for this, I'd love the idea of taking Shadow Touched to be even more shadowy and dark. That gives you invisibility. You could even take Hex or maybe Disguise Self. Just getting that added to your spell list so you don't have to take them with your Bard spell list choices, so that you can actually then go and choose other things, which are good fun. Things like Counterspell and Shield are also still great here, and I think for every build, Counterspell and Shield are always going to jump out as the big reactionary spells you should probably pick up. But generally, being a Pseudo Rogue leans into more of the skill proficiencies, because a lot of the time it's going to be the rogue that's going, hey, do I know much about this? Or hey, did I see this? The fact you get loads of skill proficiencies, and the fact that you also gain expertise just because you're a bard, you can pick up some really good stuff here. And a rogue-like bard can be the scout that the party could really need if your party doesn't otherwise have a scout. And you could be rather than a lawkeeper or a scholar, as we looked at with the wizard, you could be someone who's a little more criminal. Perhaps you're an urchin who's always had to be a bit of a trickster to get by. Maybe you use your bardic magic as a charlatan, and you're a bit of a street hustler. Maybe you're in the army, and you were actually a scout in the army, and you use your bardic magic to aid your troops. You don't necessarily have to be a shady, dodgy, chaotic neutral guy, as much as D&D probably will bring that side out of you at some point. Not every character needs to be Mr. Naughty, I'm getting up to no good, even if they are pretending to be a rogue. What about you, Adam? What's another type of build you thought of?
So I went, for my 2nd subclass, I went with the Spooky Bard, or the Occult Lawkeeper Bard. This is kind of a bard, well, it is a bard that crosses with a warlock. So I have 2 ways to go about this. Either you're either a variant human, or your DM is allowing you to have a feat at level 1. In which case, you do this with Mage Initiate, Warlock. And the inspiration behind this is because bards generally don't have, especially if you're a main spellcaster bard and that's what you want to be, and you don't want to be doing weapons, you don't have a lot to do if you're not using a spell slot. Vicious Mockery is cool, but if you're kind of building to do damage, you're going to be very unimpressed with it at low levels. And you're going to feel quite useless if you're counting on it to do good stuff.
Yes.
So what Mage Initiate gets you is it allows you to access Eldritch Blast, which is a much stronger early level cantrip. And then it gets you a first level spell. I'd consider either Hex or Armor of Agathis. And my idea was you're kind of a ghost storyteller. So you either tell like stories of ghosts, like maybe you're the Undying Warlock, and you tell a story of ghosts. The other way to do this, if you're not allowed a feat at level 1, by the way, is to do a 2-level dip in Warlock, and then it makes your Eldritch Blast a bit stronger because you can go with Agonizing Blast, and then you do have quite a strong cantrip in Agonizing Blast plus Eldritch Blast.
Yes.
But I like the idea of you either tell ghost stories of the undead or like the things from beyond or the things from the other world, and that's how you fit the bard into it. And for extra spells, just pick the spooky ones. Tasha's Mind Whip for 6th level, Synaptic Static Hypnotic Pattern, Evard's Black Tentacles at 10th level for magical secrets. It's maybe not the most effective bard subclass, but I think you could still be effective with it in combat and have a fun time being a spooky bard person.
Yeah, it's a good one to bring out for a Halloween one-shot, I think. That would be a particularly excellent one. Or even if you're a DM, having the spooky ghost storytelling bard that maybe sits in the tavern, gives seances, and you could even invite the PCs in for like, yes, let me feel the undead spirits around, and just tells these creepy stories. And that would be a great hook, actually, for a quest. Make them meet this NPC that fits this bill. And then suddenly they're like, did you hear about the story about the Jabberwocky? It's like, yeah, I don't like it. So suddenly you just kind of scare your party and make them not want to explore the big scary forest where the bad guy's big scary castle is. It's like, I don't want to even go into the forest. And suddenly, maybe the less brave players will add some really fun roleplay and fear to that. Let's say, and hopefully say, they fail some Banshee Whale saving throws and suddenly their players are literally frightened. Then it gets a whole lot of fun. But that's for the more scary kind of story. That's not designed for every player, but hey, some DMs out there will play games like that, and it can be a lot of fun if your party's up for it. My final build, which I really, really like the idea of, would be a variant human or a class that gets in a game where you get a feat at level 1, let's say, and you take moderately armored. So straight away you've got medium armor. I'm thinking you're a folk hero. You're the hero's champion that sings songs of themselves and the great tales and stories that you've been through and the mighty beasts you've slain because you're great. You go to the taverns and sing courageous songs about yourself, and you maybe could be a little bit god-touched as well. You take spiritual weapons, spirit guardians, you wade into combat next to the fighter and be like, don't worry, I've got this. You're the overly obnoxious, super charismatic, wisdom, just bomb that. You don't need to be wise. You just need to be super charismatic and really, really unintelligent when it comes to the fact that everyone hates you and you have no idea because you're the great charismatic guy. Why would they not like you? You could be a noble, you could be folk hero. I would love to play this character just so I can just bring out my inner douchebag just at the table. Not like I do that anyway, but it would be a lot of fun, I think, to just have that overly obnoxious. Think Tarion Darrington, right? Just be overly confident, overly bravado. Spiritual weapons, spirit guardians, I deal tons of damage, make the other players look bad, and feel like you're the best bard since bards were ever added to the game. What about you, Adam? I doubt your last one's that bravado or hilarious.
No, my one might be hilarious. Mine was quite different. It's the Bard of the Wilds. So we've touched a lot about bards that are maybe more in touch with civilized society. This is trying to make a bard that's less in touch with that and maybe draws on the ancient teachings of nature or some ancient text of ancient wood elves and stuff like that to gain their power. I thought maybe going with a more scout setup for your skills and expertise, similar to your rogue build.
Okay.
Rather than looking at the charisma or intelligence skills, I thought maybe going for the wisdom based and then some dexterity based skills. And for your magical secrets, I'd look at summoning and battlefield control spells, mainly from the druid list, because druids have battlefield control spells that don't require concentration. And when you have a lot of important things that take up your concentration, having things to do that don't take up concentration is really powerful and
Yes.
useful. So spells like Summon Fae, Transmute Rock, Conjure Animals, Conjure Woodland Beings, and then at 10th level also Find Greater Steed, which is actually on the Paladin spell list, but allows you to get a flying creature that you can then mount. So you can fly without concentration. A little note here, if you do take Flying Greater Steed on any bard, make sure you switch up one of your first level slots to have Feather Fall, because if someone kills the steed, you're going to fall. So make sure you have that prepared. I had a few ideas of that. One of my favorites is being like a goblin that makes all his instruments out of sort of natural materials. It's like he has like a little bone xylophone and like a hand skin drum that he plays, and looking at like other nature based creatures like the furbolg or the satyr if you have access to Theros, and then like wood elves, half elves, and halflings as well. Also, important note: if you want to make this well, concentration is a big key thing. Look at feats like resilient, concentration, warcaster, lucky, because actually, when you're playing a summoner, your concentration is more important than your spell casting because it doesn't affect summoning spells.
Yes. That sounds like a lot of fun. And actually, leading into the Greater Steed thing, one thing we should probably finish up with when it comes to the lore bard, or just any bard, is remember you can take spells from any spell list. So rangers and paladins who have some very exquisite spells available to them at 5th level, because for them that's level 17. The bard can go and say, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to grab that. That looks fun" at 9th level, or 10th level when you get it. And suddenly, you're now using abilities that the paladin is waiting and squeezing for at level 17. And there are some crazy fun spells, or just crazy high damage spells that are available to you, because the game is made with the intent that they're available to paladins and rangers at level 17. But bards break that rule, and that makes bards awesome.
Yeah, spells like Destructive Wave, Conjure Volley.
What's that
Again,
swords one?
Circle of Power. There's Steel Wing Strike. That's
One,
also
okay.
on the Wizard spell list. But
Oh, is
yeah,
it?
yeah. But if you're doing a melee bard, and we'll probably get into this with when we cover other bard subclasses that are maybe more geared towards martial classes, I think that's definitely an option on there.
Yeah. So yeah, that, my friends, is the lore bard. Overall, I would say the lore bard is a lot of fun and can patch the holes of any strangely made party or even well built party. You know, sometimes a party just can't have a guy in there that can do the little things, and that's where the lore bard comes along and says, "Don't worry, guys, I got you covered." And that can be a lot of fun. The lore bard sucks up in melee generally because spellcasting is where they shine, so if you want a melee bard, the lore bard isn't for you. But if you want to focus on spellcasting and just leaning into being the charismatic, lovable, crazy, and zany spellcaster that is the bard, the lore bard is probably one of the better choices. And just having the beautiful flexibility of using your bardic inspiration as reactions or bonus actions creates so many choices for you that makes the lore bard probably, in my eyes, the funnest bard to play. Even though they do suck early on because their AC is so terrible, and you need to wait until you can get shield or other protective spells at 6th level, or maybe have to take a feat at 4th level, or even slow your progress by multiclassing into something like fighter or cleric. If you can get around all that stuff and you can find it, or even if you start in a game a little later on, which is where the bard really will shine, once you've got a lot of your magical secrets, you should hopefully have a lot of fun. So that comes with the warning, guys. If you are starting at level 1, bards are going to have a tough time, and the lore bard even more so.
Yeah, I think that's my same advice. I was a bit down on the lore bard recently until writing up this guide and kind of considering these extra builds, because I've found it a bit generic. Like all it gets is a extra one of the things that's already on the generic bard spell list.
Mm.
So I wasn't entirely excited, but reading through it, I think there's a lot of space for creativity. But I think the main thing to consider if you go for a lore bard is understand the weaknesses of the bard-based class and work out how you're gonna work around that, whether it's just by hiding, getting out of sight of people all the time, how you're going to play that, whether you're going to rely on weapon damage early on, like getting a high enough dexterity that you can reasonably use a crossbow for a while, or like I said, taking mage initiate or going a bit into another class to get a decent cantrip option.
Yeah.
Just consider those things at low levels. Otherwise, because I have played a lore bard at low levels, and I wasn't considering those things because I wasn't entirely aware of them, and it wasn't as fun as I hoped it would be. But I think it can be if you're just aware of them and plan around them effectively.
Yeah.
Also, I'd say you really do want to make sure your campaign is going to at least level 10 to get the full fun out of this class, I think.
Yeah. So if people are saying we're going to play Lost Mines of Phandelver, and you're like, oh, we finish at level 5. Yes. I don't even get additional magical secrets.
Yeah.
So yeah, the lore bard is very much a later level mid-game subclass than it is an early game subclass, and that's just something to bear in mind. Maybe play as a completely different class and strategically kill your character at 5th level, and then come back as a lore bard. That's one way to get through the early game, but talk to your DM first. If you enjoyed this discussion and you want to catch it live, guys, be sure to join us at twitch.tv/MKxJUMP on Tuesdays at 8 PM GMT. If you want to catch these on YouTube when they go live, make sure you hit the subscribe button to catch future content. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, you can find them over here on the side of the screen. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you catch more of our D&D content in the future.